A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome everyone to another session of VOTP. So just a brief introduction of the VOTP platform. VOTP, as you probably already know, stands for Voice of the People. And VOTP was started after October the 7th, 2023, with the whole purpose of making each and every one of us aware of the power and the responsibilities that we carry in our voice. The purpose of VOTP is to empower each and every one of us to demand accountability, both from ourselves as well as from the various leaders and the various politicians in the important positions in the world. And as we began the journey of developing the VOTP platform, we realized that we ourselves are struggling with a lot of issues. And hence, we developed the platform called Find Your Truth. The goal of Find Your Truth, or the FIT.net, is the site where you can check us out. The purpose of this platform is to empower ourselves and to fill the gaps, to help ourselves, overcome our weaknesses and be able to, be responsible to both ourselves and to humanity in a way which pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today, we have a very, very important topic, which is very important. It is one of our human weaknesses. It's behavioral addiction and pornography. This is an epidemic in the current era, and all of us, are suffering from it at some level or another. And to deal with this problem, we have this important presentation by Dr. Hamza Hussain and and Brother Armaghan Khan. And inshallah, this will be very, very beneficial to us and help us understand this problem at a more deeper level, and also how we can, protect ourselves and our beloved community from these problems. So without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Hamza Hussain and Brother Armaghan Khan. And please go ahead and inshallah, we are all waiting to understand this problem and learn ways in which we can benefit ourselves. Bismillah.
Bismillah. So I'll start. Am I audible?
Yes.
My volume, are there any issues?
No, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. All right, well, welcome everyone. And so as Ms. Farhana mentioned, we're going to be discussing a topic that is generally very, you could say, taboo in our culture. We generally don't like talking about this problem because it is sort of, one of those things that we tend to push under the rug. But the problem is that now, in the current era, with the problems we're facing, we can't actually, shy away from this problem. So I'll just give you a brief structure of this seminar, this presentation. I'm just going to give you a background of digital pornography, how we actually got here, some of, you could say, the studies that have been done around how, youth or people generally consume pornography, and then I'll just give you a brief introduction about what other people call porn culture. And then Dr. Hamza, he's going to give you the scientific side of addiction and of pornography. And then I'll just finish off with some of the impacts that it has had on individuals, society, etc. So like I mentioned, I understand that this problem is something that we are very uncomfortable discussing. And that's why at the moment, if you're staying with your family or with your kids and you do not want them to actually listen to this, which is completely understandable, because we are going to be using explicit terms and it's going to be a bit crude. So I'll just give all of you a minute to, put on your headphones or move to another room, wherever you want. And I'll also want everybody to pay attention to this hadith, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had praised the companions that their shyness, their modesty did not let them or did not prevent them from asking questions about the deen, about understanding the religion. So that's why this is something, like I said, our, you could say, conservative background does tend to be excessive sometimes. There are benefits to it as well, obviously, but in cases like these, we can see the negative aspect of it because we are completely, generally, as parents, as guardians, we tend to be unaware of the problem, of the level of this problem. So just to give you a bit of a Islamic foundation, मतलब कोई हराम काम इधर ना हम नहीं कर रहे. Right. So for those of you who might not be aware, I'm sure most of you are, pornography is generally printed or visual material which contains explicit display of, sex organs and sex or sexual activity, and it is used to stimulate oneself. So basically, it's used for masturbation or जुबान में I think hand practice जो लोग कहते हैं. Now, the problem that now we face in the digital era is you've got HD 4K videos, and it is completely different from what was available to societies pre-modern era, and even within the modern era, pre-internet era. And therefore, you have complete open access to this thing. You can access it with, 2 clicks. There are no more physical barriers that used to be present. You had to, go to some, dingy shop somewhere, or if you're in Muslim countries, like you'd probably have to find some smuggled material, etc. So it was very difficult for somebody to even acquire pornographic material in the first place, especially kids. But now everyone has a phone, everyone has a laptop, like I said, 2 clicks away. And the problem with technology is that the youth tend to be very tech savvy. So they actually are the ones that are affected the most because, they know how to use these technologies. They know how to hide their history. They know how to, use VPNs, etc., etc. So you don't even know what they're consuming in the first place. And like slide says, young boys tend to be affected most. Now, this is just some numbers for everyone to just get a perspective of the severity of the problem. Study they found basically was a survey, and they were asking people about how they consumed pornography. So what they found was that 98% of men over the last 6 months had used or viewed pornography, 80 in the last week. So just to put that in context, what that means is from Monday to today, 10 people, or actually 10 men that you've spoken to, shook their hands. Eight out of those 10 men have viewed pornography. That's one hell of a number. Another study dealt with first exposure. So when was the first time young boys were exposed to pornography? The limit that they had was under 13, right? So before the age of 13. 2008, it was 14.4%. 2011, 48%. 2017, 69%. You can see the jump. I mean, it's not even it's 9 years. In 9 years, you have like this 50% jump, right? Why? Because access, right? And now, I mean, this is 2017, so that's what is that? That's 8 years ago. Now, God knows, man, Allah bajayed. What is it, 99%? Is it 100%? Again, the age of exposure is getting lower as well. So under 10s, kids under the age of 10, especially boys under the age of 8 have viewed pornography. They don't even know what it is. They don't even understand it at that age. But I mean, they've accessed it. Another study dealt with daily viewing. So the level percentage of, someone who's viewing it daily, no gaps. 2008, 5%, 11, 13, and 2017, it was 39%. And like I said, it was done for men. So obviously 2025, much, much worse. Girls are obviously they're not immune to this problem, but as how the male brain is something that's referred to as the male gaze, this type of advertisement is specifically designed to target men. Now, girls are in it as well. They have a different, you could say, a different. It has a different effect on them in that way. Generally, women tend to be exploited by these industries, which I'll talk to you about in the end of the slide. But like I said, girls are in it as well, not to the same level, but I think somebody's mic is on. Okay, right. Like I said, they're not immune to this problem as well. Now, what we're facing is, early exposure, easy access, and it's just frying their brains literally. And just to clarify, this is actually the first time in human history that there has been this, like this thing has never happened before. It has never happened before. So just to, I mean, make sure that everybody understands what is going on, right? Now I'm just moving on to the porn culture that I was talking about earlier. Our entertainment industry is something that you would call soft porn. And by soft porn, it generally means it's something, it's not explicit or, there are just legal differences, right? But obviously they don't show, full nudity or, full sexual uh, intercourse on screen. And it's more to do with, hints or just, explicit hints. And generally, it's more to do with the imagery of the thing, of the whole act, I guess. But obviously, it's the same thing. I mean, to be honest, there's the only difference is that, in one scenario, there are actually people who are having intercourse with each other. In this case, it's not. But for you to actually be affected by this exposure, it's kind of the same thing. And another problem with on culture, so for example, your Hollywood, Bollywood, Amazon Prime, Netflix, now they've reached to such a level where it's practically the same thing, to be honest. In the past, if you go back to, some of the movies of the 90s that they wanted to show some intimacy, probably show two flowers, kissing or like two birds. Now it's this whole thing, right? Now, what this does is it normalizes this fashi, what we would call, right? And obviously, these things are getting more and more tense. They're getting more and more disgusting. And that's also just specifically for, PG-18 movies, PG-17, 16 movies. This is an example from Spider-Man. Now, everybody knows, if you have kids, everybody knows what Spider-Man is if you have a little cousin. This is a scene from Spider-Man, and this is the fat guy here, that's Spider-Man's sidekick. So he's helping Spider-Man with the mission, and he's in school, and he's working on his computer, and he's I don't know what he's doing, but he's helping Spider-Man out with some mission. And he's sitting in the dark, being all sneaky. And the principal comes in and she says, "What are you doing here?" Now, you can't tell her that, he's helping Spider-Man because that would reveal his secret identity. So he tells her, "Oh, I'm looking at porn." This is a scene from Spider-Man. Now, one has to think like, why is this even here? Right? Obviously, like these things, they're well aware of what they're doing. They're well aware of what they're promoting. Social media is generally, I would call it a gateway to porn. So, for example, how cigarettes are, a gateway drug to cocaine, alcohol, etc. This is a gateway drug to explicit pornography, like proper porn, because these platforms, they are, sorry, these, so these social media platforms, they, you know, mainstream actors from these industries, they like that's their whole lingo, your memes that our youth, or even to be honest, maybe some of us as well, consume. They have explicit, pornographic material. Everybody thinks it's funny. Everyone thinks it's a joke. And this is something that they're consuming every single day. Every single day. There was an issue of Meta, so Instagram and Facebook, where Mark Zuckerberg was even he had a congressional hearing because he had exposed kids to pornography on those platforms. Now, I mean, nothing happened because they control the whole system there, but you can see what's going on here. These things are well, they were never safe, but now they're just blazant about it. They don't even care anymore, right? This is basically normalization of zina. That's all it is. And this has, profound impacts on your brain and on your spirituality, on even your self-esteem. Now, that was from my side. I think I'll just hand it over to Dr. Hamza, and he's going to talk to you about the science of addiction, the medical aspect of addiction.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. As Armaghan has introduced us to the topic of pornography and discussed the extent to which it has entered our homes, I'm going to proceed with talking about what pornography does in the brain, and why is it so addictive. And so for us to understand why it is so addictive, we need to have a basic understanding of addiction. So we'll start with that. Could we go to the first slide, please? So addiction, if you define it in the simplest of terms, it is any repetitive behavior or dependence on a substance or activity that is difficult to control or stop. This can range from anything. We're talking about pornography. Definitely, pornography is an addiction. Video gaming can be an addiction. You could be addicted to any kind of medication, drugs, social media, all those sorts of things. They're all some form of addiction. So to understand addiction better, we need to understand our brain chemistry. And there is especially a part in our brain that we call the reward pathway. And in the medical terminology, it is known as the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, which is a pathway in our brain. And it is, we use this pathway every day in our lives, from the smallest of thing, to, when you're hungry and you make food, you use this pathway. When you wake up in the morning and make a cup of coffee, you use it, when you care for your kids, or, when you do any task in your daily life, from the most normal task. Yeah, this is a system that is being used. However, this pathway is also being used by all these addictive behaviors, such as, the drugs, pornography, gambling, gaming. All of these things, they trigger the same pathway. So could we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So we're going to talk, since we're talking about the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, let's define what dopamine is. You guys might have heard dopamine, it's a term a lot of people use these days. So dopamine is a chemical in our brain. It is a neurotransmitter. So let's say it is a chemical in our brain that helps us anticipate rewards, and it motivates us to pursue rewards or pursue goals. Simpler terms, dopamine is a chemical that drives you to get out of bed in the morning, or go to work, or complete any sort of task, make your bed, make food, complete that assignment you got from school, study for an exam, all of that. That's all dopamine. That's what it does. It keeps you in pursuit of a goal or a reward. So like I gave you the example, when you're hungry, your brain releases dopamine. So that dopamine is what motivates you to, go to the kitchen, open the fridge, find food, have food, or, you'll cook food, whatever. So once you have that food, what happens is more dopamine gets released. So once you complete that task or whatever you're doing, it helps to release more dopamine. And that dopamine is then later registered in a place called the prefrontal cortex. It's really good, or this felt good. Let's do more of it. We'll keep doing this. That's how you develop these, survival instincts from, having food, bonding with your loved ones, caring for them, all of this. That's how you develop it. So, I'm going to mention a few names here, which are part of the mesolimbic dopamine pathway. They're not, you don't need to know them. I'm just going to mention it so you know what happens in case, you want to go back and give it a Google search or learn more about it. So how the mesolimbic dopamine pathway works is it starts somewhere in an area called as the ventral tegmental area. The dopamine is initially released. Once it is released from there, it is registered at the nucleus accumbens. That is where we get that good feeling when we complete a task or when we're pursuing a task, when we're studying for that exam to get a really high score. So that motivation that keeps you on track, that happens in the nucleus accumbens. And once the task has been completed and you get more dopamine, then it is registered at the prefrontal cortex, which makes you realize that this is something, we liked and we should repeat it more often. So that's how that cycle starts. Could we go to the next slide? Okay, so I've already mentioned how, this mesolimbic dopamine system works in the normal functioning of our body. So, it helps with ensuring that we keep repeating survival behaviors like eating, learning, connecting, bonding, all of that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we get that, how it works in the normal system, but like I mentioned, the same system also applies to addiction. However, even though it's the same system that is being used with drugs, social media, pornography, gambling, junk food, video gaming, all of these addictions. However, there is a fundamental difference, and that fundamental difference is in the amount of dopamine. The amount of dopamine between both these things in the same pathway is huge. With addiction, the amount of dopamine skyrockets. It goes through the roof. So now you've had a surge of all this pleasure, a surge of all this, good feeling. So now your brain is like, your prefrontal cortex is like, this feels so much better than all the other things I've been doing, and when you go back to doing these other things, when you're studying for that exam, that dopamine, even though your dopamine is spiking slightly above baseline, relatively you're in such a big deficit that you think, this is so boring. Why would I do this? I would rather stick to those behaviors, They make me feel so good. And this is how we fall, and this is how this addiction cascade starts. And in the long run, definitely we know it has detrimental effects on the brain, and it leads us into a cycle of overconsumption. We keep going into this cycle. The example I like to use, especially one I can personally relate to, is of junk food. I remember when, for the first time, I think it was a McDonald's meal. It's been more than a decade now. For the first time I had it, and you could, and it felt so good, despite that McDonald's meal probably did not have much nutritious value, but it just felt so good. The high sugar content, the salt content, and the fat content just spiked my dopamine. And over time, when you keep repeating or keep having, junk food, even though the home cooked food is so much better for you, probably tastes better, and is more nutritious for you, more healthy for you, it kind of gets boring. You don't want to have that food anymore. So that's all dopamine, and then it leads you into this cycle of just repeating and having falling into these habits on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So since we talked about addiction and the pathway that is used and how dopamine floods the brain, and it is dopamine that keeps you in it. So another term that we need to talk, two terms actually we need to talk about is tolerance and um, withdrawal. So we'll begin with tolerance. So basically, tolerance is, when uh, when you do a certain activity, let's say when you watched a movie for the first time, right? And you felt so good while watching that movie, and now you love the movie. Now, let's say a week later, you watch the same movie. Even though it's the same movie, the same scenes, the same cliffhangers, it doesn't feel as good now. Now, you think, okay, it's fine. A, a week later, you watch it for the third time, it feels boring. A week later, you watch it for the fourth time. You're most likely on your fourth time, you're probably, you know, on your phone because that would probably give you more dopamine than the movie now. The movie seems boring now. That is exactly what tolerance is. So what happens is when, you go into these behaviors, into these addiction pathways, the amount of dopamine in your brain is huge. So the brain wants to protect itself now because the brain feels it is being overstimulated, too much stimulation. So what the brain does is it reduces or downregulates things known as receptors. Receptors are basically where the dopamine is going to come and attach itself. So the dopamine comes and attaches itself to the receptors, and once it attaches itself, it can carry out its, function, its effects. So when there is less receptors, there'll be less pleasure, despite the same amount of dopamine. So in order for you to, feel that high that you felt for the first time, you need to increase the amount of dopamine. And you have to change the activity, or you have to prolong the activity, or you have to change the substance or increase the dose of a certain substance to have the same amount, have the same effect and have more dopamine now. So in the case of pornography, the example, it is a perfect example actually. So whenever people indulge in pornography, they start with a video, right? When we're watching that video, they get this high of dopamine. Next time, when they watch the same video, it won't give them the same high. So they'll have to switch from that video to a different video. And then they'll slowly keep shifting to different videos in search of that high of dopamine. And from videos to different genres and, more gruesome content over time. So that is what tolerance is. Could we go to the next slide? Okay. So since we talked about tolerance, we need to talk about withdrawal. So withdrawal happens when you stop an addictive behavior and the levels of dopamine drop sharply. We probably all know smokers in our lives. So if you've known a smoker and you've known them to try to quit, smoking or vaping, any kind of nicotine addiction. So initially, when they try to stop, when the first day goes by, you can tell that they get more irritated, they're more irritable, and they have a low mood, and their patience is always running thin. That is because of that deficit of dopamine, and it applies to all addictions. All of these addictions, in one way or another, they trigger the dopamine levels, and especially with you can say, yeah, especially with pornography and social media even, when if you've been on social media and you love scrolling throughout the day, when you delete social media or try to limit your usage, you kind of feel bored, or you kind of feel like, oh, this, you have this feeling of discomfort. All that feeling is a deficit in dopamine. And a lot of the times that deficit is relative. But what I mean by relative is it's probably a baseline. The dopamine is probably at baseline. But what happens is, since you've been used to such artificial highs, even though it's come to baseline, comparatively to those highs, you feel like you're in a deficit and you get that feeling of, discomfort and, you're bored, as a lot of kids would say. So, that's what withdrawal is. Withdrawal is just a deficit of dopamine when you initially, stop using a certain substance, a certain, activity. Go to the next slide, please. So, since we talked about what pathways are being used in addiction and how pornography also uses the same pathway, like I mentioned earlier, the mesolimbic dopamine system has, at the end of it, the dopamine is registered by a place in our brain, in the frontal lobe of our brain, known as the prefrontal cortex. So this part of the brain is, responsible for having self-control, decision making. So, when you keep repeating these behaviors and the prefrontal cortex is like, okay, this feels good. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing it. Over time, the areas, when you flood it with such high dopamine and you repeat it so often, the prefrontal cortex weakens the part of self-control and decision making. That part weakens. Now, at the same time, when you keep repeating these behaviors, when that behavior is repeated again and again, places like the amygdala and the striatum in the limbic system, which are responsible for the emotional aspect of things and, craving areas, they strengthen. So like there was a question just now how, addiction comes back 2 years later. So, when you are addicted to something and when you've been in addiction, these areas, these craving areas, they get stronger and stronger. So it's not like when you stop addiction, you remove these areas. They always remain there. So to an extent, you will always have to maintain, extreme discipline and distance yourself from these things because if you go back to these habits, it'll be just like you haven't left them because your brain still remembers what happens. However, moving forward, what happens is when these areas get stronger and the prefrontal cortex gets weaker, what you end up with is, the activity or that you started or the addiction you started as, from being a conscious choice now is an automatic compulsion. You do it without even thinking about it. It just happens. So like in the case of pornography, in the case of social media, you see yourself picking up your phone and, going straight to these things without thinking about it. Especially with a lot of us can relate to this, especially social media. I myself also can relate to this, all of us can. That I would wake up in the morning and the first thing I would do is, open Facebook, open Instagram without even thinking about it, scrolling endlessly, not even registering any of the information on there, just, out of, addiction, out of habit. Next slide, please. Okay, so, since we talked about addiction, what happens, the scientific part of it, the chemicals that are being released, the pathways, how it leads to a cycle of overconsumption. But we also should talk about something, some of the psychological triggers that behind addiction, some of the psychological triggers that lead to addiction. Initially, whenever you're addicted to something, especially pornography, it is not going to be by mistake or by fluke. For many of the kids, it begins with curiosity, So when your kids go to school, they'll hear about it from somewhere, some of their friends, or will talk about it, have you watched this video or, this website, or, they'll hear about it from somewhere. So what curiosity does is curiosity always activates dopamine centers in your brain. And it gives you this feeling of, wanting to explore into it. Not just for pornography, for anything. Whenever, you search for that why is this happening? Why is that happening? The centers of curiosity open and you're more prone to explore into that specific, addiction or habit. So pornography is the same. So, you're more intrigued to learn, to watch, and to seek stimulation. So what happens is, kids will go home and, on their laptops, phone, whatever they have, they'll try to, search up a site and everything. And that's how they begin through curiosity. However, there's a lot more to the psychological triggers. I feel in addition to this, low self-esteem issues, having low confidence, being insecure, having a stressful work environment or stress at home, Not everybody has an ideal situation at work or home. And just generally being unable to regulate your emotions, all of these can drive individuals toward pornography or other high dopamine activities, not just pornography. And these habits help you momentarily climb out of that, dopamine deficit that is created by life's ongoing problems. And instead of confronting these issues, what a lot of us do is you know, or seeking healthy coping mechanisms, we bury our emotions and, our problems deep inside, and we find escape in addiction. Hence, this addiction persists as a coping mechanism. It helps us avoid problems by offering instant gratification. So, and over time, what happens is the brain becomes intolerant and it cannot stand any delay in that gratification. We want it right then and there instantly. So the idea of, waiting for rewards or facing discomfort or working towards a goal, it just becomes unbearable if you're in any of these high dopamine, habits. And it just traps that person in a loop of repeated behavior. And it goes to the extent that it's not for pleasure anymore. It's just for relief, to just get you out of your misery because you're not dealing with your problems and the cause that is leading you to into addiction. Uh, can we go to the next slide? So, like we've talked about, how we get addicted to pornography and the amount of dopamine it releases. So now that we have a basic understanding of dopamine, its role in survival and addiction, we can talk about exactly, specifically pornography, how it impacts the brain. So you might have heard that pornography has been compared to drugs like cocaine and heroin. And you might think, this is an over-exaggeration, but it is not an over-exaggeration. It is exactly this case, especially, physically, probably is not the case. Physically, you can, if you come across a cocaine or a heroin addict, you probably can recognize them physically. We probably will not be able to recognize a porn addict visually. However, the chemical pathways in our brains uh, are so similar. Porn, cocaine, and heroin, release the similar amounts of high dopamine, similar, mesolimbic dopamine pathway they trigger, and same areas of the brain they trigger, right? So, and so to the extent you are actually in an addiction, a lot of the people have made it normal today, right? Thinking pornography probably isn't as bad because there isn't, physically you cannot see the effect straight away. But the effects are there. The effects are definitely there in your chemistry, in your brain chemistry, and they will later, sooner or later, obviously show in your physical appearance, definitely too. So a lot of the people who are addicted to pornography, the first exposure, as Armaghan mentioned, the age I think is now less than 10. The numbers these days, children less than 10 are consuming pornography. And at that age, when you get that spike of dopamine, now at that early age, when you're exposed to such high levels of dopamine, you're more prone to now stay in that cycle, to keep repeating the pornography behavior, and later there's more likely for you to shift to hardcore drugs or shift to other behaviors, gambling, all of that, because all of these habits, they expose you to a similar level of dopamine, so you're more prone to go into these habits. So with pornography, what happens is over time, obviously, like I mentioned, tolerance builds up. So now you're getting less dopamine from the same video, same amount of time. So now what you do is you watch more videos and you watch them more frequently. You can and it leads to hours of consumption, and eventually you're so dependent on it that even you cannot spend a day without watching pornography. Could we go to the next slide, please? And obviously, when you have been addicted to pornography for such a long time, and all these pathways have been triggered and your brain is so used to these high levels of, artificial levels of dopamine, it creates a different kind of brain now. And this brain obviously is bored most of the time if it is not doing any of these, behaviors. And this leads to, being ill-disciplined, having no motivation or very low motivation for, the daily habits that you need to do, for getting out of bed, for working towards a goal, for, seeking, you know, caring for your loved ones, any of the tasks that we need to do as humans daily, right? They become boring to us. And we rather, just sit in our room, open our phones, watch pornography, go through social media, play video games, have junk food, and you just enter this cycle of, addiction, and just keeps you there if you let it. However, pornography also has an impact on your social and personal life. It just not does not remain to just, uh, being driven by high dopamine activities. Pornography in specific, it alters your perception of the opposite gender, especially for men. They are more prone, and they do, think of women as just sex objects if they have been, watching pornography for a long time. And this, obviously leads into their relationships. They obviously have a very, detrimental sexual life where they expect an artificial or let's say fabricated expectations of their partner, which they have derived from the material they have been consuming all this time. And when that expectation isn't met because it does not exist, so what happens is they remain unsatisfied and they go back to watching more pornography. And at the same time, when their female spouse or their spouse feels, unworthy or not enough. And this is the story of many, uh, uh, many homes, especially, these days. And I was reading somewhere, I'm pretty sure Armaghan knows better, that the stats of divorce in America are related, a lot of them are related to, a lot of the divorces. They had that, the one of the partners was involved in watching pornography. However, moving forward, obviously, this obviously, additionally in marriage, men who are, like I mentioned, addicted to pornography, they have an unsatisfying sex life and unrealistic expectation. This leads to issues not just with sexual performance, which is also a very big matter these days. A lot of the men have problems like erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, and a lot of the reasons for that is psychological rather than medical. It is because of their inability to perform, because what they have viewed or what turns them on does not exist. And it is all driven from the content they have consumed. I would like to mention another part, which I should have mentioned on the previous slide. One of the reasons why pornography today is so addictive is because it lacks the two things you need to, stay away from addiction. It is the psychological barrier and the physical barrier. So, like Armaghan mentioned, in that Spider-Man movie, he's mentioning that he's watching porn like it's a normal thing. So today, the psychological barrier does not exist. Even if you're not, watching porn specifically, a lot of, soft porn movies on Netflix are available. So that element of objectifying women and, changing the image of sex exists. So there is no psychological barrier anymore. People don't find it to be a bad thing, especially in the West. And at the same time, there is no physical barrier because, as Armaghan mentioned, before kids or men who were into this sort of thing, they would have to go to a place to buy a DVD or a magazine. Now you have a phone. So, you can access it at any place, anytime, anywhere. And this is all from my side. I think I'm going to go back to Armaghan now. He will explain the rest of the presentation.
Right. Jazakallah, Dr. Hamza. So I'll just move on to some of the impacts that pornography has. Now, as Dr. Hamza was talking about there, the new brain that this activity creates, the new type of brain that it creates, is basically creates depressed zombies. And as the slide says as well, especially in young men. And the problem is that these depressed zombies, they lack purpose, they lack will, they lack determination, they lack discipline, they lack haya, modesty. And these people are basically themselves a burden on the society as well, but also on their family. Because like Dr. Hamza was saying that generally the behaviors that normal human beings or even animals do, you have to communicate with your society, you have to work, you have to get food, all of the basic stuff that you need to do to actually function as a living being, as a thing. You can't really do that because your brain is literally fried. And the problems that we're facing in the world right now, I mean, in our countries, in the Ummah, we need very, very competent people. We need high disciplined people. We need people that are willing to, lift the burden of the Ummah on their backs, especially in men. But, you can't do that now because you're a depressed zombie, right? Just a quote from Aristotle, actually, I found it was quite interesting. So he talks about, modesty, haya, same thing. And he says that basically modesty is a form of self-awareness which helps in controlling desires. And when you control your desires, you have virtue. Now, for Aristotle, virtue just meant good, right? So goodness. And, I mean, this is a very, very old idea that you have to actually, not just for men as well, but women, you have to, have this control over yourself, this awareness of your own self, that you would not let your desires control you. And the problem is that when you do let these desires overtake you, you are easily triggered, you're easily manipulated, you're easily controlled. Now, Hamza, I think sort of was a bit of he sort of spoiled my slide there. But yes, there's 56% of divorces in America. And again, this is an old statistic. Sorry, my studies are a bit old. Sorry about that, everyone. But they are partially caused by pornography, and reasonably so. I mean, the spouse feels betrayed. It's sort of kind of like cheating, to be honest. Like, I mean, why would anybody even engage in that? But he explained the whole. I mean, obviously, I talked about how this isn't just happening randomly. It's a very, you could say, a planned, sophisticated weapon that's being used against regular folk. The impact that this has on children as well. I mean, also in the fact of the divorce as well, how divorces traumatizes kids, but also to their psychology as well. Because as Dr. Hamza was saying, the way dopamine works is that you need something new, something better, something bigger. And that's why you have these, categories in pornography. You have incestuous porn, you have animal. I mean, sorry to say, it's just completely absurd. It's just disgusting stuff. But the thing is, dopamine also works with shock as well. So if you find something that's really offensive, your dopamine gets triggered as well. I think Dr. Hamza missed that a bit. But that's also one aspect of dopamine. So these entire categories are just not only frying your brain, but it's destroying the structure of a normal society. It's breaking individuals, and it's also an attack on the family unit, right? And if you want to actually have a civilizational revival, which I mean VOTP is a proponent of, and so are we, because sorry to say, but we're tired of getting slaughtered and killed. We need to protect this unit, and this thing, pornography, is a direct attack on the foundations of what we need to actually build ourselves. Now, this is also apart from the social aspects of it, it is also the impact that it has on the individuals as well, because this thing takes away your joy. You can't enjoy time with your family. You can't really enjoy, sitting with your mother, with your sister. It's because it's fried your brain. You cannot enjoy time with your spouse. There's just a lot of if you hear testimonies of people that have suffered from addiction, it just it breaks a person's heart. What they're as an individual, as an addict, what they're going through as well. And what Hamza was talking about as well was that you have this addiction as well, but now that you're in sort of this, you could say trap, you also need more stimuli. So you need junk food, you need a more, what do you call it, stimulating behaviors. You need drugs. You need, you won't be satisfied with what you have, and obviously, you're not even disciplined enough to work hard. So it just completely breaks your will as well. It breaks a person down, and this is generally what is promoted in in today's economy as well. We're individualized, we're alone, and we're exploited. Right? We have to, maybe I'm addicted, for example, I can't get married because, my brain is fried and I can't actually work as well. So I'll just buy these things that'll satisfy me. But the thing is, it doesn't, because the thing that you're missing, like the thing that pornography is taking away from you, material consumption can't provide that for you, right? So now, like I said, you're individualized, you become a consumer, and you're then controlled as well. Because generally, what people, well, not people, what governments prefer, what people in power prefer, are distracted, weak, right? People that cannot organize, that kind of a population, and that's where we are at. Yes, lower birth rates as well, because if you have divorces, if you can't get married, if you have, like Dr. Unza was saying, if you have, issues medically, psychologically, you can't perform, you won't have kids. And that is something that, well, I mean, it's sort of, it's happening to the West. So, some people say it's happened, right? So, uh, generally, you need 2.1 percent birth rate. So that means like it's a weird sort of, but at least minimum, you need two kids for a couple, and that's how they replace each other and make let society function. In the West, it's all of so-called civilized countries, Japan, West America, all of that, India as well now, China, they have a birth rate below two. I think in North Korea it was like 0.8 or 0.5. It was absurd. Now we're doing a bit better generally Muslim countries, but like I said, this thing has entered our homes in the last few months. So do you think the next generation will be able to, survive this? I mean, what makes you think that the people, the Christians of the West or the Jews of the West, etc., or the people that actually uh, want to have kids, etc., if they fail, what makes you think that you yourself are going to survive, or your kids actually? How do you think you're going to survive? I think I've already talked about the junk foods of the habits, so the life that you create for yourself when you are under this addiction. I think I spoke about the elites consolidating their power as well. And yes, this is 100% this is the case. Who, for all of generally the men here, because women generally won't be aware of such explicit details, all of these pornographic sites are generally owned by one company. And do a Google search who owns them. Sorry to say it's some rabbi from America. Another problem is porn has been used as a weapon throughout, you could say, in the 21st century. So, for example, when America invaded Afghanistan, when they invaded Iraq, when they took control of the TV stations, they actually bombarded the population with pornography. That's a bit absurd. Like, I thought you were here to give people, I mean, what's the point of doing that? Like I said, they know what the impact of this weapon is on the people. Israel uses it on Palestinians as well. Yes, I mean, I think I forget when this was, which battle, which war, but I think for months, like you would turn on the TV and this is what you would have to watch. And we're just letting our kids, just have open access to this day and night, right? What do you think it's going to go do to them? Right. So this is generally, like I said, I'm not sure if I said that in the introduction, but this is just an introduction for all of you, just to show you the level of threat, the level of our enemy, the danger of this weapon, right? So don't think that these slides, which I'm assume will be shared with you afterwards, don't think that these are just all there is. You have to do your own research, which I'll just talk about in the next slide. But let me just conclude with what I'm saying, what we've discussed so far. I talked about generally the history, well, not history, just a brief introduction to internet pornography, porn culture. Dr. Hamza explained the medical, psychological aspect of it, and then I explained to you some of the consequences, real world impacts that this has had. Just a bit of guidance for the parents here, guardians, sorry, is that the correct spelling for guardians? I don't think it is. My bad. Sorry about that. For older brothers, older siblings, if you have a little cousin, if you have a friend from school, firstly, we have to understand that this is actually something that you can't be enforced right away, right? So step one is generally guide rather than block. Yes, you have to monitor the internet in your house. You can do that by, I think, talking to your internet providers, installing parental controls on your children's phone. Just watch a YouTube video. I mean, come on, it doesn't take that long, right? Just do your own research, understand, for example, it's different for Android, it's different for iOS. Just do your own research, understand how you need to, install these things and actually make sure they work. Because like I said, kids are tech savvy, so we have to be careful in that regard as well. And yes, monitor uh, their behavior, a bit of policing, but you can't really just snatch phones away from them right now. Because that's we've already given them the phones, so you can't really snatch it right now. But yes, you have to introduce boundaries. And obviously, I mean, I'm not a parent myself, so you know much more than me and how you actually discipline kids. Yes, step two is teach discipline, so which means actually the damage that the brain has already had from these hyper stimulating activities, junk food, pornography, video games, social media, you have to now add activities in your daily life for yourself and for your basically the people that you are helping, your children, little siblings, etc., etc. Uh, introducing mentally demanding tasks, making them read difficult books, learning a new language, something that's difficult, that's challenging, that's going to test them, apart from school. Because trust me, school it's not doing their job. If there were, we wouldn't have had this problem. Physically demanding jobs as well, right? So, push them into sports, make sure, they do combat sports, whatever, but something that will test them, which will, create them as stronger individuals later on. Because if they haven't struggled in their youth, do you think they're going to survive the risk of the real world? No. Sorry. So yeah, so step three was plan, don't react. So rather than just after the lecture you shocked now that, oh my God, I thought मेरा बच्चा तो बस जो है नाते ही देख रहा था YouTube पे कार्टून ही सारा दिन देख रहा था. नहीं. Again, if you snatch their phone away, it's not gonna work because you yourself are gonna give it back after a week. So have a vision for kid the people, the men, women you want to raise, the people you want to see in society, to have a vision for them, and then train them into it. Step number 4, I think, is very important as well, because like I mentioned, with our conservative culture, which is definitely has its benefits, we tend to be very shy away from these sort of things. A father might discuss with his son, but probably not with his daughter. But this, we need to open conversation, because the thing is, they are going to learn in school, or from their older cousin, or from their driver, or from someone who is not their guardian, someone in an unsafe environment, right? They're going to say, beta, ye wo dekhi flan video hai, etc., etc. Even like your first introduction is something like this is something, sneaky, you have to be sneaky about this, which is not the case. Islamically, we don't have this, this Catholic view of intimacy. We think it's worship. Just look at I think in the second chapter, Surah Baqarah, like there's literally verses talking about intimacy, or I think Surah Nisa, or the life of the Prophet. They were very, very open about these things. Now, obviously, I'm not saying you just do that just straight away, like from day one, you just start talking about all of these things with your kids. But you have to take this step. And number 5 is introduce healthy habits. So, time off technology, doing meaningful activities, doing creative activities. And like I mentioned, I'm not a parent. Hamza is not a parent. We can't tell you how to raise your kids. We probably don't know how to do that ourselves. But I'm just explaining to you this problem, right? And you might need to adjust your parental model. So I think that's it for me, Miss Farida, if the audience has any questions.
Jazakallah khair, Armaghan and Dr. Hamza. Subhanallah, very, very well explained, and very insightful, points as well, as parents, what actions we can take. So, the audience, please go ahead and you can raise your...
So questions you can ask in English, in Urdu, मतलब कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. हमने असल में ना हल निकालना है. हमने इसका वो करना है, तो कोई भी वो नहीं है अगर आपने इंग्लिश में बोलना है, उर्दू में बोलना है. पश्तो में अगर बोलना है, बाकी को समझ नहीं आएगा. तो इंग्लिश उर्दू का.
So would you like me to put the recording off at this point? Is it more comfortable that way? Yeah?
Yeah, I think that'll be good. Yeah.
Okay, may I please request to fill in the survey form? Brother Armaghan, could you also request it, because we need to plan ahead? It's very important to get the surveys in, inshallah.
Yeah, so everyone, yes, please complete the survey forms. It's very good feedback for the organizers as well, and generally improve their